The heavy oak doors of the Davidson County Family Courthouse groaned open at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a crisp October morning. 3-year-old Emma Martinez stepped inside, her tiny hand engulfed by her foster mother's larger, warmer grip. The building smelled of old wood, lemon cleaner, and something else Emma couldn't quite name. The weight of 1,000 broken families, perhaps, or the lingering echo of children's tears absorbed into the walls over decades. Emma's eyes remained fixed on the polished marble floor. 187 days had passed since anyone had heard her voice. Not a word, not a cry, not even a whimper in the night when the nightmares came, and they came often. Her silence had become her armor, her protection, her prison. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's foster mother for the past 6 months, felt the familiar ache in her chest as she looked down at the child. This morning, she tried everything to coax even a smile from Emma. She made chocolate chip pancakes in the shape of butterflies, Emma's favorite, or at least what Maria hoped was her favorite since the little girl couldn't tell her. She'd laid out 3 different dresses and asked Emma to point to the one she wanted. Emma had simply stood there, staring, until Maria gently dressed her in the blue one with small white flowers. The stuffed rabbit clutched in Emma's other hand told its own heartbreaking story. Once upon a time, it had been white and fluffy, with pristine pink ears and a cheerful embroidered smile. Now it was a dingy gray, worn nearly bald from years of desperate clutching. One ear hung by threads. The smile had faded to almost nothing. But it was the only possession Emma had been allowed to bring from her biological mother's apartment, the only familiar thing in a world that had been turned completely upside down. "Come on, sweetheart," Maria whispered gently, guiding Emma toward Courtroom 4B. "It's going to be okay. I promise." But Emma didn't believe in promises anymore. Promises, in her short experience, were things adults said and then forgot. Her mother had promised to come home that night. She hadn't, had promised the next night too, and the next, until the police came and the nice lady with the badge said Emma had to go somewhere safe for a while. The courtroom was already buzzing with activity when they entered. Lawyers in expensive suits shuffled through towers of paperwork, their briefcases sprawled open across tables. Social workers huddled in corners, speaking in hushed tones about trauma responses and attachment disorders, and other terms that reduced Emma's pain to clinical definitions. The court reporter was setting up her machine, fingers dancing across the keys in a brief warm-up exercise. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the 3rd row of the gallery, her leather-bound notebook already open. As the lead child psychologist assigned to Emma's case, she'd spent 6 months trying every therapeutic technique in her arsenal. Play therapy, Emma had sat motionless with the toys. Art therapy, Emma had held the crayon but refused to draw. Music therapy, Emma had shown a flicker of interest but still wouldn't sing or hum along. Even animal-assisted therapy at Dr. Chen's office, with a certified therapy rabbit, had yielded nothing. The diagnosis in Dr. Chen's notes was clear: selective mutism secondary to severe trauma and neglect. But knowing the diagnosis didn't help crack the code of reaching this child. Emma's file read like a tragedy. A mother with untreated substance abuse issues, multiple reports to Child Protective Services, each one investigated and closed due to insufficient evidence. Until that final night when neighbors called about a toddler crying alone in an apartment, hungry and terrified, while her mother had been gone for 3 days straight. Maria guided Emma to their designated seats, feeling the little girl's entire body trembling. At 28 pounds, Emma was severely underweight for her age. Maria had been working with nutritionists, trying to help Emma gain weight healthily, but stress kept her appetite suppressed. Some nights, Emma would take 3 bites of dinner and then sit frozen, staring at her plate like it might bite back. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and everyone stood as Judge Patricia Morrison entered. She was a woman in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and reading glasses that perpetually hung on a chain around her neck. She'd presided over family court for 23 years and had seen every heartbreak imaginable, but cases like Emma's, they never got easier. As people settled back into their seats, Emma's grip on the stuffed rabbit tightened until her knuckles turned white. She could feel all the adult eyes on her, could hear them shuffling papers with her name on them, talking about her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. That's when it happened. The side door of the courtroom, the one near the judge's bench, creaked open slowly. Emma's eyes flickered up for just a second, a reflex more than curiosity, and that's when she saw him. Officer Jake Thompson stepped through the doorway first, his crisp navy uniform perfectly pressed, his badge catching the fluorescent lights. But Emma barely noticed the officer. Her entire attention locked onto what, or rather, who walked beside him. A golden retriever, magnificent and gentle, moved with quiet grace across the courtroom floor. His coat shimmered like spun gold in the light streaming through the high windows. On his vest, a medal caught Emma's eye, Certified Therapy K9 Memphis Police Department. But it wasn't the medal or the coat or even the impressive size of the dog that made Emma's breath catch in her throat. It was his eyes. Ranger's deep brown eyes swept across the courtroom with a knowing intelligence, a gentle wisdom that seemed impossible for an animal. And when those eyes found Emma, they stopped. Just stopped. As if every step he'd taken that morning had been leading him to this exact moment, to this exact little girl. Something passed between them in that instant, a recognition that transcended species, age, or circumstance. Emma's death grip on the rabbit loosened slightly. Her head lifted a fraction of an inch. Her lips parted, though no sound emerged. Not yet. But for the first time in 187 days, Emma Martinez felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Officer Thompson noticed his partner's reaction immediately. After 15 years working with K9 units, he developed an almost telepathic connection with his dogs. He could read Ranger's body language like a book, and right now, every line of the golden retriever's posture said the same thing. This child needs me. Ranger's tail gave the slightest wag, barely perceptible to anyone else in the room, but Thompson saw it. The dog had found his purpose for the day. Maria felt the subtle shift in Emma's body language. The little girl wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was staring, completely transfixed, at the golden dog across the courtroom. Maria's heart began to race. In 6 months, she'd never seen Emma show this kind of interest in anything. Dr. Chen noticed too. Her pen paused above her notebook. She leaned forward slightly in her seat, professional instincts on high alert. Something was happening, something significant. The judge cleared her throat, preparing to call the court to order. Lawyers opened their files. The social worker pulled out her recommendations. The machinery of the family court system was ready to grind forward with another case, another decision, another child's fate hanging in the balance. But none of them, not the judge, not the lawyers, not even Dr. Chen with all her years of experience, had any idea that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Because Emma Martinez, the little girl who hadn't spoken in 187 days, was about to find her voice again. And it would only take 2 words to change everything. Time seemed to slow down, the way it does in moments that will be remembered forever. Emma's small body shifted forward in her seat, her weight moving from her back to the balls of her feet. Maria felt it happening, and her hand instinctively tightened around Emma's fingers, a protective reflex born from 6 months of watching this fragile child navigate a world that had already hurt her so deeply. But Emma pulled away. It wasn't rough or defiant, just a gentle, determined extraction of her hand from Maria's grasp. Maria's breath caught in her throat. In half a year, Emma had never voluntarily let go of her hand in public. Never. The little girl clung to Maria in grocery stores, at the pediatrician's office, even in the safety of their own home. Physical contact was Emma's lifeline, her anchor to something stable in a world that had proven itself terrifyingly unstable. Yet now she was letting go. Emma stood up from her seat, and the movement, though small, seemed impossibly loud in the formal courtroom. The chair scraped slightly against the floor. The sound cut through the low murmur of pre-hearing conversations like a knife through butter. Attorney Richard Morrison, representing the state in Emma's case, stopped mid-sentence in his conversation with opposing counsel. His eyes tracked the small figure rising from her seat. Sarah Chen's pen froze above her notebook, her mouth opening slightly in surprise. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys, suddenly uncertain whether this moment needed documenting. The stuffed rabbit, that threadbare, beloved companion that had been Emma's constant presence through every terrifying transition, slipped from her fingers and fell to the floor with a soft thump. Maria gasped audibly. Her hand flew to her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. That rabbit had been surgically attached to Emma for 6 months. The child had slept with it, bathed with it still sitting on the bathroom counter within eyesight, refused to eat unless it was beside her plate. Child psychologists had told Maria that the rabbit represented Emma's only connection to her previous life, to her mother, to everything familiar. Losing sight of it would cause panic attacks. But Emma didn't even glance down at the fallen toy. Her eyes remained locked on Ranger with an intensity that was almost frightening. It was as if the rest of the courtroom had ceased to exist. The judge, the lawyers, the imposing wood paneling, the American flag in the corner, Maria, even her beloved rabbit. None of it mattered. Only the golden dog mattered. Emma took her first step forward. The courtroom fell into absolute, crystalline silence. Judge Morrison had been reaching for her gavel to call the court to order. Her hand stopped in midair, fingers suspended above the polished wood. She'd been a judge for 23 years, had presided over thousands of cases, had seen everything the family court system could throw at her. But something about this moment made her freeze, an instinct telling her that whatever was happening was more important than protocol. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, representing Emma's biological mother's interests, had been pulling files from her briefcase. The papers remained clutched in her hand, forgotten, as she watched the small girl move across the courtroom floor. Emma took another step, and another. Her shoes, little white Mary Janes that Maria had bought her last month, made soft tapping sounds against the marble floor. In the utter silence of the courtroom, each footfall echoed like a heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. Officer Jake Thompson's hand moved instinctively toward Ranger's collar. It was pure reflex, the caution of a handler who'd spent 15 years ensuring his partners behaved perfectly in every situation. But something made him pause. He looked down at Ranger, reading the dog's body language with the expertise of long partnership. Ranger sat in perfect police K9 form, back straight, head up, alert and professional. But there was something else in his posture, something Thompson had learned to recognize over their 3 years together. The dog's eyes had gone soft, his breathing had slowed, and his entire energy had shifted from working dog to something else entirely. Ranger had entered what Thompson privately called therapy mode, that incredible transformation that happened when the dog encountered someone in deep emotional pain. It was like watching a switch flip. The dog, who could track criminals and detect narcotics with fierce determination, became a creature of pure gentleness and intuitive compassion. Thompson's hand moved away from the collar. He trusted his partner completely. Emma was halfway across the courtroom now, 10 feet away, 8 feet, 6 feet. The bailiff, a burly man named Marcus Williams who'd worked courthouse security for 17 years, found himself holding his breath. He'd seen hundreds of children pass through these courtrooms, angry children, crying children, confused children. But he'd never seen anything quite like the expression on this little girl's face. It was desperate and hopeful all at once, like someone who'd been drowning and had just spotted a rescue boat. Dr. Chen's clinical mind was racing even as her emotional heart swelled with unprecedented hope. In her notes, she documented Emma's complete lack of engagement with the therapy animals at her practice. The rabbits, the cat, Even the gentle golden retriever she'd borrowed from a colleague, Emma had shown zero interest. She'd stare through them as if they were invisible. Dr. Chen had concluded that animal therapy wouldn't be effective for this particular child. She'd been wrong. Emma stopped directly in front of Ranger. The 3-year-old was tiny, barely 3 feet tall, and the sitting dog was nearly at her eye level. They were face to face, child and canine, two wounded souls recognizing something fundamental in each other. The courtroom held its collective breath. 37 people, lawyers, social workers, court staff, and observers, all frozen in place, watching, waiting. Emma raised her right hand, small and pale and trembling. Her fingers extended toward Ranger's head, moving with aching slowness, as if she was afraid the dog might disappear like smoke if she moved too quickly. Ranger remained absolutely still. He didn't move toward her, that might startle her. He didn't move away, that might break whatever fragile connection was forming. He simply sat, breathing softly, his warm brown eyes fixed on Emma's face with an expression that Thompson had seen dozens of times but never stopped finding miraculous. It was pure, uncomplicated love. Emma's fingertips made contact with the soft fur on top of Ranger's head. A shudder ran through her small body. Her fingers spread, her palm flattening against the dog's skull, feeling the warmth of him, the solid realness of him, the living proof that gentle things still existed in the world. Maria was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe away the tears streaming down her face. Her husband Carlos, who'd taken the morning off work to be here, reached over and squeezed her shoulder, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Emma's other hand came up, both palms now resting on Ranger's head. She leaned forward, her forehead pressing gently against the dog's nose, her eyes closed. For 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds she stood like that, a prayer in physical form, a plea for connection, a test to see if trust was still possible. Ranger passed the test. He didn't move, didn't pull away, just accepted her touch with infinite patience, his tail giving one slow, gentle wag. Emma's eyes opened. She pulled back slightly, just enough to look directly into Ranger's eyes again. Her lips parted. Her throat worked, muscles that hadn't formed words in 187 days suddenly remembering their purpose. The first sound that emerged was barely audible, a whisper so soft that only Ranger and Officer Thompson could hear it. "My." Emma's voice cracked. She swallowed hard, her small body shaking with the effort of breaking 6 months of silence. "My friend." Then, as if she needed to confirm it, as if she needed everyone to know, as if she needed to claim this truth loudly enough that no one could take it away, Emma's voice rose, stronger, clearer, filled with wonder and relief and joy. "My friend." The courtroom exploded. Maria collapsed back into her seat, sobbing so hard her shoulders shook. Carlos wrapped his arms around her, his own tears falling freely now. Dr. Chen dropped her pen entirely, her professional composure shattered as she pressed both hands to her mouth, crying and laughing simultaneously. Attorney Morrison let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Jennifer Walsh, the opposing counsel who was supposed to be adversarial, reached across the aisle and gripped Morrison's hand, both of them grinning through tears. The court reporter gave up any pretense of professional detachment and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The bailiff turned away, facing the wall, his broad shoulders shaking. Judge Patricia Morrison removed her glasses with trembling fingers and pulled a tissue from somewhere within her robes, dabbing at her eyes with zero shame. In 23 years on the bench, she'd never cried in open court. Until now. And in the center of it all, Emma wrapped her small arms around Ranger's neck and buried her face in his golden fur. The dog, with the infinite wisdom that made him extraordinary at his work, gently leaned his weight into the embrace. Not enough to knock her over, just enough to let her feel his solid presence, his warmth, his unconditional acceptance. Emma was speaking. After 187 days of silence, after 6 months of the best therapists and social workers trying everything they could think of, after countless failed interventions and careful treatment plans, a rescue dog had succeeded where everyone else had failed. And this was only the beginning. Judge Morrison's voice was thick with emotion when she finally spoke. I think we need a moment here." She cleared her throat, attempting to regain some semblance of judicial composure but failing spectacularly as another tear traced down her cheek. "Officer Thompson, would you mind? Could you tell us about your partner?" Jake Thompson had been a police officer for 19 years total, 15 of those working with K-9 units. He'd testified in court hundreds of times, always professional, always composed. But standing here now, watching this tiny traumatized girl clinging to his dog like Ranger was the only solid thing in her world. Thompson felt his own throat tighten with emotion. He knelt down slowly beside Emma and Ranger, his knee joints cracking slightly, a reminder that he wasn't getting any younger. At 42, he'd been considering retirement in a few years, maybe moving to the mountains with Ranger, doing some part-time security consulting. But moments like this reminded him exactly why he'd never be able to fully walk away from this work. "Your Honor," Thompson began, his voice rougher than usual. "This is Ranger. He's been my partner for 3 years now, but before that—" He paused, looking at Emma, whose face was still buried in Ranger's fur but whose body had shifted slightly. She was listening. "Before that, Ranger had a very different life." Emma's head turned just a fraction of an inch. One eye peeked out from the golden fur, fixed on Thompson's face. 3 years ago, on a hot July night, I got a call from dispatch," Thompson continued. "Someone had reported hearing a dog crying behind a strip mall on the east side of Memphis. When I arrived, I found Ranger chained to a dumpster with a logging chain. The kind of chain you'd use to tow a truck, not to secure a living creature." The courtroom was silent again, but this time it was a different quality of silence. Before, it had been the silence of shock and joy. Now it was the silence of people bracing themselves for something painful. Maria reached for Carlos's hand, gripping it tightly. "He was starving," Thompson said quietly. "I could count every rib. His hip bones were jutting out. He had open wounds on his neck where the chain had rubbed the fur and skin completely away. He was covered in scars, old ones, new ones. Someone had hurt this dog, badly and repeatedly for a long time." Emma's other eye appeared now, both eyes fixed on Thompson with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. She understood. Of course she understood. She knew exactly what it meant to be hurt by people who were supposed to take care of you. "Someone hurt him." Emma's voice was small, rusty from disuse, but clear enough that everyone in the courtroom heard it. Her third and fourth words in 187 days. Thompson nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, bad people hurt him very much." Emma's small hand stroked Ranger's head with a tenderness that made several people in the courtroom reach for tissues again. "Why?" she whispered. Fifth word. "I don't know, Emma. Sometimes people do terrible things and there's no good reason for it. Sometimes people are sick in their hearts, or they're hurting so much themselves that they hurt others." Emma processed this, her young mind working through concepts that no 3-year-old should have to understand. "Did you save him?" Sixth, seventh, and eighth words coming faster now, as if a dam was breaking. "I did," Thompson confirmed. "I cut that chain off him, wrapped him in my jacket, and carried him to my truck. He was so weak he couldn't even walk. I drove him straight to the emergency vet, Dr. Patricia Chen's clinic." Dr. Sarah Chen, the psychologist, jerked slightly in her seat. "Patricia Chen, the veterinarian, is your sister." Thompson smiled slightly. "My wife, actually. She runs the 24-hour emergency animal clinic on Poplar Avenue." What he didn't say, what he couldn't say without breaking down entirely, was how he'd sat in that clinic's waiting room at 2 in the morning, covered in the blood and filth from the dog he'd just rescued, praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in that this animal would survive. How Patricia had emerged from surgery 3 hours later, exhausted and grim-faced, telling him the dog had a chance but it would be touch and go for days. The vet said he might not make it, Thompson continued. He was so malnourished, so dehydrated, and the infections from his wounds were severe. But Ranger is a fighter. Emma pulled back from the dog slightly, looking him over with new eyes. She could see the faint scars now, hidden beneath the golden fur. A line across his shoulder, another on his back leg. The slightly crooked way his left ear sat, probably broken at some point and healed incorrectly. "He got better?" Emma asked, and the hope in her voice was so naked, so desperate that Maria had to stifle a sob. This wasn't just a question about a dog. This was Emma asking if broken things could be fixed, if wounded things could heal, if she herself could get better. "He got better," Thompson confirmed, his own voice thick. "It took months of medicine and careful feeding and gentle handling. At first he was terrified of everything. Loud noises made him shake. Quick movements made him flinch. He couldn't trust anyone." Emma nodded slowly. She understood that too. The flinching, the fear, the inability to trust. "But slowly, day by day, he started to heal," Thompson continued. "Not just his body, but his heart. He learned that not all people are cruel. He learned that hands can pet instead of hit. He learned that voices can be kind instead of angry. He learned to trust again." "How long did it take?" Dr. Sarah Chen asked quietly, her psychologist's mind already drawing parallels to Emma's own trauma recovery timeline. Thompson thought about it. For his physical wounds, about 4 months. For his emotional wounds, honestly, I think he's still healing in some ways. Trauma doesn't just disappear, it becomes part of who you are. But he learned to live with it, to be happy despite it. Emma's hand continued its gentle stroking of Ranger's head. The dog's eyes had half closed in contentment, his tail maintaining a slow, steady wag. "After he recovered, I started training him," Thompson said. "I'd worked with police dogs for over a decade by then, and I saw something special in Ranger. He had this incredible ability to read people's emotions. He could tell when someone was scared or sad or hurting. It was like his own pain had given him a superpower, the ability to recognize pain in others." "Empathy," Dr. Chen murmured. "Trauma can sometimes heighten empathetic responses." "Exactly," Thompson agreed. "So I got him certified not just as a standard police K9, but as a trauma response therapy dog. It's a specialized certification that takes over a year of training. He had to learn to stay calm in chaotic situations, to approach people gently, to read subtle emotional cues, to provide comfort without being intrusive." Emma looked up at Thompson with wide eyes. "He helps people." "He helps people," Thompson confirmed. "Especially kids who have been through scary things. Kids who have been hurt or witnessed violence or lost someone they love. Ranger goes to hospitals, to schools after traumatic events, to courtrooms like this one. This is actually his 53rd court case involving children." 53, Judge Morrison asked, surprised. Thompson nodded. "He's been doing this work for 2.5 years now. We get called in whenever there's a case involving a traumatized child who has to testify or attend hearings. His presence helps them feel safe, calmer, more able to handle the stress of the legal process." He looked down at Emma, who was watching him with rapt attention. "But I've never seen him react to a child quite like he reacted to you, Emma. The way he looked at you when we walked in, I've seen that look before, but never quite this intense. It's like he knew, like he recognized something in you." "We're the same," Emma said softly. 9 and 10 and 11. The words were flowing more freely now. "We both got hurt, we both got scared, we both—" She paused, searching for the word, "survived." Thompson felt his eyes burning. "Yes, sweetheart, you both survived. And just like Ranger got better, you're going to get better too." "Promise?" Emma asked, and the vulnerability in that single word broke something open in Thompson's chest. He wanted to promise. God, how he wanted to promise this child that everything would be okay, that she'd never hurt again, that life would be kind to her from now on. But he'd been a cop too long to make promises he couldn't guarantee. "I promise that you have people who love you and want to help you," he said instead. "I promise that Maria and Carlos are going to take the best care of you they can. I promise that Dr. Chen is going to help you work through the scary feelings. And I promise that Ranger and I are going to be here for you, for as long as you need us." Emma considered this. Then she looked at Ranger, really looked at him, studying his face like she was memorizing it. "Ranger," she said, testing out the name. "That's a good name, Strong." "It is," Thompson agreed. "Rangers are protectors, guardians. They watch over people and keep them safe." Emma leaned forward again, pressing her forehead against Ranger's. "Thank you for being my friend," she whispered to the dog. "Thank you for understanding." Ranger's tail wagged faster, and he gently licked Emma's cheek. Around the courtroom, there wasn't a dry eye to be found. Attorney Morrison had given up trying to hide his tears. Jennifer Walsh was openly crying. The bailiff had turned completely around, facing the wall, his shoulders shaking. Even the court reporter had abandoned her machine entirely, watching the scene unfold with tears streaming down her face. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and wiped her eyes properly this time. "Officer Thompson, I think I speak for everyone here when I say thank you. Thank you for saving this remarkable dog, and thank you for bringing him here today." Thompson stood up, his knees protesting slightly. "Your Honor, if I may, I think Ranger has some more work to do with Emma. Would it be possible to take a longer recess? Maybe let them spend some time together in a less formal setting?" The judge didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. We'll reconvene in 2 hours. I think we all need some time to process what just happened here." But what none of them fully understood yet was that this wasn't just a heartwarming moment. It was the beginning of a transformation that would change Emma's life, Thompson's understanding of his own work, and an entire community's approach to healing traumatized children. Two wounded souls had found each other. And together, they were about to show everyone what real healing looked like. Dr. Sarah Chen moved quickly, her professional instincts overriding the emotional response still making her hands shake. She approached the judge's bench with purpose, her notebook clutched against her chest like armor. "Your Honor, I need to formally request this recess be used for an emergency therapeutic assessment. What we just witnessed, Emma speaking for the first time in 6 months, this is clinically significant. We need to capitalize on this breakthrough immediately." Judge Morrison nodded, still dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Whatever you need, Dr. Chen. Use conference room C. It's private, comfortable, and has windows. I'll have my clerk unlock it for you. I'd like Officer Thompson and Ranger to remain present if that's acceptable," Dr. Chen continued. "Clearly, the dog is the catalyst here. Removing him now could cause Emma to retreat back into silence." Thompson didn't wait for official permission. "We'll stay as long as Emma needs us. I'll call into the station, let them know I'm off rotation for the rest of the day." Maria stood up, her legs shaky, still holding Carlos's hand like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Can we come too? I don't want Emma to feel abandoned or—" "Absolutely," Dr. Chen interrupted gently. "You're her primary attachment figure now, Maria. Your presence is crucial." 10 minutes later, they were settled in conference room C. The space was designed to be less intimidating than the courtroom. Soft gray walls instead of dark wood paneling, comfortable chairs instead of hard benches, and large windows overlooking a small garden where birds flitted between feeders. It was as close to non-institutional as a courthouse room could get. Emma sat on the carpeted floor, her legs crossed, with Ranger lying down beside her. The dog had positioned himself so his head rested on Emma's lap, and her small fingers traced patterns through his fur with a repetitive, soothing motion. It was a self-regulating behavior, Dr. Chen noted, using tactile sensation to manage overwhelming emotions. Maria and Carlos sat in chairs nearby, close enough to provide security but far enough to give Emma space. Thompson stood by the window, trying to make himself unobtrusive but ready to intervene if Ranger needed guidance. Dr. Chen pulled a chair to Emma's level, sitting about 4 feet away, close enough to engage, far enough not to crowd. For the first 2 minutes, nobody spoke. They just let Emma be, let her settle into this new dynamic, let her brain adjust to the monumental shift of using her voice again after months of protective silence. Emma broke the silence herself. "Does Ranger live with you?" she asked Thompson, her voice still carrying that rusty quality, like an old gate being opened for the first time in years. Thompson smiled. "He does. He has his own bed in our bedroom, but most nights he ends up sleeping on the bed with me and my wife. He's a bed hog, takes up way more space than a dog should." A tiny smile flickered across Emma's face. It was so brief that if you blinked you'd miss it, but Maria saw it. Her hand flew to her mouth, fresh tears spilling. In 6 months she'd never seen Emma smile, not once. "Does he have toys?" Emma asked. "So many toys," Thompson laughed. "He has a whole basket of them. His favorite is this beat-up tennis ball that used to be bright yellow but now it's kind of gray and slobbery. He carries it everywhere." Emma looked down at Ranger. "I have a rabbit," she said quietly, then her face crumpled slightly. "I dropped him in the courtroom, I forgot about him." "I have him, baby," Maria said quickly, reaching into her bag and pulling out the threadbare stuffed animal. "He's right here, safe." But Emma didn't reach for the rabbit. She looked at it, then back at Ranger, and something shifted in her expression. A tiny step toward independence, toward realizing she didn't need to cling quite so desperately to that one comfort object. "Can I keep petting Ranger instead?" she asked Maria, and the question itself was monumental. Emma was advocating for herself, expressing a preference, asking for what she wanted instead of just accepting whatever was given to her. "Of course, sweetheart," Maria managed, her voice choked with emotion. "Of course you can." Dr. Chen decided it was time to gently probe deeper. "Emma, can you tell me what it felt like when you saw Ranger walk into the courtroom?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still moving through Ranger's fur. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, carefully, like she was pulling them up from somewhere deep inside herself. "I felt less alone," she said. "Everybody in that room was talking about me, but nobody was talking to me. They were using big words I don't understand. They kept saying the child like I'm not even a person with a name. But then Ranger came in and he looked at me like he saw me, really saw me. Not the child, not the case, just me." Dr. Chen's pen flew across her notebook. This level of self-awareness from a 3-year-old was extraordinary, though trauma often forced children to develop emotional intelligence far beyond their years. "And when I looked at his eyes," Emma continued, her own eyes fixed on Ranger's face, "I saw that he understood. He knows what it's like to be scared. He knows what it's like when people hurt you. He knows what it's like to not know if anyone will ever be nice to you again." Thompson had to turn away, facing the window, his shoulders tight. He'd rescued dozens of abused animals over his career, had seen Ranger help countless people, but hearing it articulated this way, through the words of a traumatized child, hit differently. "Can you tell me about being scared, Emma?" Dr. Chen asked gently. "You're safe here. No one's going to be angry with you for telling the truth." Emma's hand stilled in Ranger's fur. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Maria started to worry that they'd pushed too far, that Emma would retreat back into her protective mutism. But then Emma started talking, and once she started, it was like a dam breaking. "Mommy loved me," Emma said first, establishing that crucial foundation. "She did love me. She would sing to me at bedtime and make me pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse and tell me I was her special girl." "Of course she loved you," Maria said softly. "But then she got sad," Emma continued. "Really, really sad. She stopped singing. She stopped making pancakes. She stopped talking to me very much. She would sleep all day or she would go away and I didn't know where. She started forgetting things, forgetting to buy food, forgetting to turn on the heat when it was cold, forgetting that I was there. Dr. Chen's clinical assessment was already forming: maternal depression, likely substance abuse, severe neglect. But she kept her face neutral, encouraging. "I tried to be good," Emma said, and her voice cracked. "I tried so hard to be good. I thought if I was good enough, if I was quiet enough, if I didn't ask for too much, maybe Mommy would be happy again. Maybe she would remember me." "Oh, baby," Maria whispered, tears streaming freely now. "But it didn't work," Emma said. "Nothing worked. And then one night Mommy said she had to go out for just a little while and she'd be right back. But she didn't come back. Not that night, not the next day, not the next night. I was so hungry and scared, and I didn't know what to do." "How long were you alone, Emma?" Dr. Chen asked gently. "I don't know," Emma said. "A long time. The sun came up and went down and came up again. Maybe 3 times. I tried to find food, but there wasn't any, just empty boxes. I drank water from the bathroom sink. I waited by the door. I thought maybe if I waited long enough, Mommy would remember and come back." The room was silent, except for the sound of Maria's quiet crying and the gentle rhythm of Ranger's breathing. "But then the loud knocking came," Emma continued. "Bang, bang, bang on the door, and voices saying, 'Police, open up.' And I was so scared because Mommy always said the police would take me away if they found out she left me alone. And I didn't want to be taken away. I wanted my Mommy." "But they did take you away," Dr. Chen said softly. Emma nodded. "A nice lady police officer picked me up. She had a kind face, but I was too scared to talk. She kept asking me questions. 'Where's your Mommy? What's your name? Are you hurt?' But I couldn't make words come out. The words were stuck inside, trapped. And then I went to a big building with lots of people, and they were all asking questions, and there were so many voices and bright lights and people touching me to check if I was okay, and it was too much, too loud, too scary. So I made myself quiet, all the way quiet, on the inside and the outside." "That must have felt safer," Dr. Chen observed. "Like you could control one thing when everything else was out of control." "Yes," Emma said, looking at Dr. Chen with those 2 old eyes. "Nobody listens to little kids anyway. Grown-ups do what they want. They make all the choices. So why bother talking? But the quiet I could choose, that was mine." Thompson turned back from the window, his eyes red. "Emma, we listened. We're listening now." "I know," Emma said simply. "But I didn't know that before. Before I thought all grown-ups were like Mommy. They say they'll come back, but they don't. They say they'll take care of you, but they forget. They say they love you, but then they leave." Maria made a small, wounded sound. Emma looked up at her foster mother. "I know you're different, Mama Maria. You came every day. You didn't forget me. You didn't leave. But my brain kept waiting for you to leave. Kept telling me not to get too comfortable, not to trust too much, because you'd probably leave too." "I'm not leaving, baby," Maria said fiercely. "I'm never leaving." "I think I'm starting to believe that," Emma said, "especially now." "What changed?" Dr. Chen asked. "What made now different?" Emma looked at Ranger, her small hand resting on his head. "Ranger changed it. Because Officer Thompson told me Ranger was hurt bad, worse than me probably. People were really, really mean to him, but he got better. He learned to trust again. He learned to be happy again, and if he could do it, maybe I can too." It was a question, not a statement. A 3-year-old asking the adults in the room if healing was truly possible, if broken things could really be made whole again. "You absolutely can," Dr. Chen said with conviction. "Emma, what you've been through is not your fault. None of it. Not your mother's illness, not being left alone, not being taken away, not being scared. None of that is your fault." "Then whose fault is it?" Emma asked. And the question was so direct, so plaintive, that it pierced straight through every adult heart in the room. "Sometimes bad things happen and it's nobody's fault," Thompson said quietly. Your mom was sick in her mind and her heart. Sickness made her forget how to take care of you. That doesn't mean she didn't love you. It just means the sickness was stronger than her love for a while. Emma absorbed this, processing it with the seriousness of someone much older. Can she get better too? Emma asked. Like Ranger did, like I'm going to. Dr. Chen and Maria exchanged glances. This was delicate territory. She's trying, Maria said carefully. Your mommy is in a place where people are helping her get better, but grown-up sickness takes a long time to heal, longer than kid sickness sometimes. Will I see her again? Maybe someday, Maria said, when she's healthier, when it's safe. But right now, the most important thing is making sure you're safe and healthy and loved. Emma nodded slowly, then looked back at Ranger. Did Ranger ever see the people who hurt him again? No, Thompson said firmly. Never. We made sure of that. They can't hurt him anymore. Ever. Good, Emma said with surprising fierceness. Nobody should hurt dogs or kids or anybody. You're absolutely right, Dr. Chen agreed. For the next 45 minutes, Emma continued to talk, the words flowing more freely with each passing moment. She talked about nightmares where she was alone in the dark apartment forever, about being afraid of doors closing because it might mean someone was leaving and not coming back, about not wanting to eat sometimes because her stomach felt too tight with worry, about loving Maria and Carlos but being scared to love them too much in case they disappeared. And through it all, Ranger stayed pressed against her side, a warm, solid, breathing reminder that survival was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, that love could exist without abandonment. When they finally emerged from the conference room 2 hours later, Emma was a different child than the one who'd entered the courtroom that morning. She was still traumatized, still healing, still fragile in many ways. But she was no longer silent. And that changed everything. By 7 o'clock the next morning, Officer Jake Thompson's phone had already rung 14 times. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee growing cold in front of him, staring at the screen as another call came in. Ranger lay at his feet, sensing his partner's tension, occasionally nudging Thompson's leg with his nose. You're popular today, Patricia Thompson said, sliding into the chair across from her husband. As the veterinarian who'd saved Ranger 3 years ago, she understood the power of animal-human bonds better than most. But even she seemed surprised by the magnitude of response to yesterday's courtroom breakthrough. The News Channel 5 has called 4 times, Thompson said, scrolling through his missed calls. The commercial appeal wants an interview. The police chief called twice, and there are at least 30 messages from numbers I don't recognize. What Thompson didn't know yet was that courthouse clerk Jennifer Martinez had told her sister about Emma's miraculous moment with Ranger. Her sister, who worked at the local library, had mentioned it to her book club. Someone in the book club had posted about it on Facebook, just a vague post about witnessing the most beautiful moment of healing, without naming names or violating privacy. But Memphis wasn't a huge city, and the courthouse community was even smaller. By midnight, the story had spread through social media like wildfire. Not the exploitative kind of viral content, but the kind that touches something deep in people's hearts, the kind that reminds them why they still believe in goodness despite all evidence to the contrary. A local news producer whose own daughter had selective mutism saw the post and recognized the courthouse described. She made calls, found sources, verified details. By 6 a.m., News Channel 5 was leading with the story. Rescue dog helps traumatized child find her voice in Memphis courtroom. They'd been careful. No photos of Emma, no full name, just a 3-year-old in foster care, and focused primarily on Ranger's role as a certified therapy K9. But the impact was immediate and overwhelming. Thompson's phone rang again. This time he answered. Officer Thompson, this is Robert Chen. I'm calling from East Memphis. I saw the story about your dog this morning and the man's voice broke. My grandson has been in therapy for 8 months. He watched his father die in a car accident and he hasn't spoken since. He's 5 years old. Is there any way? Could he meet Ranger? I know it's asking a lot, but... Yes, Thompson said without hesitation. Give me your contact information. We'll arrange something. The next call was similar, and the next, and the next. A mother whose daughter had been abused by a babysitter. A father whose son witnessed a violent crime. A grandmother raising her grandchildren after their mother's overdose. A social worker handling a case of sibling separation. Each call represented a child drowning in trauma and parents desperate for any lifeline. By noon, Thompson had received 47 calls and over 200 emails. At the Memphis Police Department's North Precinct, Police Chief Marcus Williams sat in his office reviewing the same news coverage. He was a 30-year veteran of the force, a man who'd seen every kind of human tragedy and learned to maintain professional distance. But the story of Emma and Ranger had gotten to him. More importantly, it had gotten to the entire city. His assistant knocked on the door. "Chief, you need to see this." She handed him a printout of the department's donation page. In the past 12 hours, they'd received $47,000 in donations specifically earmarked for the K-9 therapy program. Williams sat back in his chair, stunned. The K-9 unit had been chronically underfunded for years. They'd been operating Ranger's therapy work essentially on Thompson's volunteer time and personal expense. There'd been discussions about shutting down the therapy program entirely, keeping only the traditional police dogs for narcotics and pursuit work. Now, suddenly, they had more funding than they'd seen in a decade. His phone rang. "Chief Williams, this is Dr. Sharon Foster from the Memphis Veterinary Partners. We'd like to offer free medical care for any therapy dogs in the police program. Complete care, vaccinations, checkups, emergency services, everything. We were so moved by that story this morning." Before Williams could fully process that offer, his assistant was back. "Chief, there's a Margaret Wu on line 2. She owns Premier Dog Training Academy. Says she wants to donate her services to certify new therapy dogs." The calls kept coming. A local pet supply company offered to donate food, beds, toys, and equipment for therapy dogs. A real estate developer offered to fund the construction of a dedicated K-9 training facility. A retired veterinary surgeon volunteered to come out of retirement specifically to support therapy animals. 3 professional dog trainers offered their services free of charge. By the end of the day, Chief Williams had enough resources to expand the therapy K-9 program from 1 dog to potentially 6. But the most important call came to Maria Rodriguez's cell phone at 2:47 p.m. She'd been sitting on her back porch, watching Emma play in the yard, actually play, for the first time in 6 months. The little girl was talking to herself, narrating an elaborate story involving her stuffed rabbit and 3 action figures Carlos had bought her. Just the sound of Emma's voice, chattering away freely, made Maria cry happy tears. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Jake Thompson." "Oh, Officer Thompson, how are you? How's Ranger?" "We're good, but we're also completely overwhelmed. Maria, I've gotten over 60 calls today from families with traumatized children. Parents who saw the news story and are desperate for their kids to experience what Emma did." Maria's heart clenched. She looked at Emma, thought about how possessive she'd felt about Ranger yesterday, about not wanting to share this magical connection that had brought her daughter back to her. Then she thought about all those other children, trapped in silence like Emma had been, and she felt ashamed of her selfishness. "What can we do to help?" she asked. "I want to bring Ranger to visit Emma regularly, twice a week if that works for you, but I also need to ask, would you be willing to let me share more of Emma's story? Not her name, not identifying details, but enough to show other families what's possible. There's so much need out there, Maria. So many kids hurting." Maria watched Emma spin in a circle, her arms outstretched, laughing. The sound of her laughter was still so new, so precious. "Let me ask Emma," Maria said. "She should have a say in this." She walked across the yard and knelt down to Emma's level. "Sweet pea, Officer Thompson is on the phone. He wants to know if it's okay if he tells other people about how Ranger helped you find your voice. There are other kids who are scared and sad like you were, and their mommies and daddies think maybe Ranger could help them too." Emma's face grew serious, processing this information with that premature gravity that traumatized children often developed. "Would Ranger still come see me?" "Yes, baby, he'd still come see you, but he might also see other kids too." Emma thought about this for a long moment. Then she said something that made Maria's heart swell with pride. "Other kids need friends too. Ranger has a big heart. He can be friends with lots of kids." Maria relayed this to Thompson, her voice thick with emotion. "She's an incredible kid," Thompson said softly. "Tell her thank you, and Maria, I'm going to make sure she always gets her Ranger time. That's a promise." That evening, the Memphis Police Department held an emergency press conference. Chief Williams stood at the podium, with Thompson and Ranger beside him. "This morning, a story aired about one of our Therapy K-9 officers helping a traumatized child," Williams began. "The response has been overwhelming. In less than 24 hours, we've received nearly $75,000 in donations, offers of free veterinary care, training services, and equipment. But more than that, we've received over 100 calls from families in crisis, asking for help." The cameras flashed as Ranger sat perfectly still, his metal gleaming. "I'm here to announce the expansion of our K-9 therapy program," Williams continued. "We're going to recruit and train 5 additional therapy dogs over the next 6 months. We're partnering with local shelters to find rescue dogs, animals who have overcome their own trauma, and train them to help others heal." A reporter raised her hand. "Chief Williams, can you tell us more about the child who started all this?" Williams smiled slightly. "I can tell you that she's a 3-year-old in foster care who hadn't spoken in 6 months due to severe trauma. Yesterday, she met K-9 Officer Ranger in a courtroom and she found her voice again. Today, she's talking, playing, and healing. And she wanted other children to know that healing is possible." Thompson stepped forward. "Ranger came to us as a rescue 3 years ago, abused, starving, terrified. The same vet who saved his life is now my wife. We've seen firsthand how animals who have survived trauma have this incredible ability to recognize and comfort others in pain. It's not magic. It's empathy. It's connection. It's the simple truth that sometimes the best healer for a wounded heart is another wounded heart that's learned to beat strong again." Another reporter spoke up. "What can the community do to help?" "If you want to donate, donations can be made through the Memphis Police Foundation, specifically designated for the K-9 therapy program," Williams said. "But more than money, we need volunteers, foster families for dogs in training, trainers, people willing to help socialize these animals. This is going to be a community effort." By the time the press conference ended, the donation total had climbed to $120,000. Local news stations were running the story every hour. The hashtag Rangers of Hope started trending on social media, with people sharing their own stories of healing through animal connection. At a downtown advertising firm, creative director Lisa Park saw the news coverage and immediately called her team together. "Pro bono project," she announced. "We're creating a public awareness campaign for the Memphis K-9 therapy program. Full campaign, print, digital, video. Who's in?" Every hand in the room went up. At Memphis Animal Services, shelter director Tom Rodriguez, no relation to Maria, watched the same coverage and started going through their kennels with new eyes. Dogs who'd been overlooked for adoption because they were too old or too anxious or too scared suddenly became candidates for something greater. These weren't damaged goods. They were survivors. And survivors, as Ranger had proven, made the best healers. By the end of the week, 5 dogs had been identified as potential therapy K9 candidates. A 7-year-old lab mix who'd been returned to the shelter 3 times for being too needy. A golden retriever with 3 legs who'd been hit by a car. A German shepherd who'd been confiscated from a fighting ring but showed no aggression. A border collie with anxiety issues. And a mixed breed who'd been found living in an abandoned building with her puppies. Each had a story. Each had survived something terrible. Each had potential for greatness. The training program began immediately, with volunteer trainers donating hundreds of hours. The dogs learned to stay calm in chaotic environments, to approach gently, to read human emotion, to provide comfort without being overwhelming. But the real test would come when they met their first traumatized children. And thanks to Emma's courage in sharing her story, there would be plenty of children waiting to meet them. Children who needed to know that broken things could be made whole again, that silence could transform into song, that healing was always, always possible. One little girl, one rescue dog, and 2 simple words, my friend, had started a revolution. And Memphis would never be the same. 3 months had passed since that transformative October morning when Emma first spoke Ranger's name. Now, on a cold January afternoon, the same courtroom was packed with people who had followed Emma's journey from the beginning. But this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. The gallery was filled beyond capacity. Social workers who'd worked on Emma's case sat shoulder to shoulder with courthouse staff who'd witnessed the original breakthrough. Local news reporters occupied the back row, cameras forbidden inside but notebooks ready. Even Judge Morrison's clerk had arrived early to secure a seat. This was a hearing nobody wanted to miss. Maria Rodriguez sat in the front row, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Beside her, Carlos squeezed her shoulder, his own anxiety barely concealed behind a forced smile. They'd been through every possible emotion over the past 3 months: hope, fear, joy, terror. All while watching Emma transform from a silent, traumatized shell of a child into a vibrant, chattering, laughing little girl. But today would determine everything. Today, Judge Morrison would make her final ruling on the permanent custody and adoption petition. The side door opened, and Officer Jake Thompson entered with Ranger, just as he had 12 weeks ago. But so much had changed since then. Ranger now wore a special vest that read Therapy K9 Memphis PD along with a new patch. Emma's Friends Program lead dog. The K9 Therapy initiative that had exploded from Emma's story now had an official name: 5 dogs in training and a waiting list of over 300 children. Emma, sitting beside Maria, lit up the moment she saw Ranger. "Ranger," she called out, her voice clear and strong, no trace of the rustiness that had marked her first words. She started to jump up, then remembered where she was and looked at Maria. "Can I say hi?" "After the hearing starts, baby," Maria whispered. "Judge Morrison needs to come in first." Emma nodded, but her eyes never left the golden dog. Over the past 3 months, Ranger had visited Emma twice a week without fail, every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. sharp. Those visits had become sacred time, an hour where Emma would sit with Ranger and talk about everything. Her fears, her dreams, her confusion about loving her biological mother while being angry at her, her growing attachment to Maria and Carlos, her worries about what forever really meant. Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd incorporated Ranger into Emma's therapy sessions, had documented remarkable progress. Emma was speaking freely now, attending preschool, making friends, sleeping through most nights without nightmares. She still had hard days when the trauma felt fresh and overwhelming, but she'd learned to articulate those feelings instead of retreating into silence. "All rise," the bailiff announced, and the courtroom stood as Judge Morrison entered. The judge had aged visibly in 3 months, not from stress, but from the emotional weight of Emma's case. She'd presided over thousands of family court cases in her 23-year career, but something about this one had gotten under her skin in a way few others had. Maybe it was witnessing the exact moment a child found her voice again. Maybe it was the reminder that healing was possible even in the most broken situations. "Please be seated," Judge Morrison said, settling into her chair and arranging the substantial file in front of her. "We're here today for the final hearing in the matter of Emma Grace Martinez. This court will determine permanent custody and rule on the adoption petition filed by Maria Elena Rodriguez and Carlos Miguel Rodriguez." Emma's middle name was Grace. Maria had learned that from the birth certificate. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Grace was exactly what this child had needed, and exactly what she'd finally received. "Before we begin formal proceedings," Judge Morrison continued, "I want to acknowledge something unusual. This courtroom is more crowded than I've ever seen it for a custody hearing. I understand many of you have followed Emma's journey, and while I appreciate your support, I must insist on absolute decorum. This is still a legal proceeding, and Emma's privacy and well-being are paramount." The gallery murmured agreement. Several people wiped their eyes preemptively, knowing tears were inevitable. Judge Morrison looked at Emma over her reading glasses. "Emma, do you remember me?" Emma nodded seriously. "Yes, ma'am, you're the judge. You sit up high and make important decisions." A ripple of soft laughter moved through the courtroom. "That's right," Judge Morrison said with a slight smile. "And today I'm going to make a very important decision about your future. But first, I'd like to hear from you. Do you think you could talk to me for a few minutes?" Emma looked at Maria, who nodded encouragingly. Then Emma looked at Ranger, who Thompson had positioned nearby. The dog's presence seemed to give her courage. "Okay," Emma said, "I can talk." "Wonderful. Emma, do you know why you're here today?" "Yes, ma'am. You're deciding if I can stay with Mama Maria and Papa Carlos forever and ever, and if they can adopt me so I'm really truly their daughter and not just foster." Judge Morrison felt her throat tighten but maintained her professional composure. "That's exactly right. And how do you feel about that?" Emma's response was immediate and emphatic. "I want to stay with them forever. They're my real family now." "Can you tell me what makes them your real family?" Emma thought about this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Well, Papa Carlos makes me breakfast every morning, pancakes on weekends, oatmeal with cinnamon on school days, and he does my hair for preschool even though he's not very good at ponytails yet." Carlos let out a choked laugh-sob from the gallery. "And Mama Maria reads me 3 stories every night before bed, even when she's really tired from work. She tucks my blankets in tight like a burrito because I told her it makes me feel safe. And when I have bad dreams, she comes and sits by my bed until I fall back asleep." Maria was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. "They never forget me," Emma continued, and this was the heart of it, the core wound that had needed healing. "They always come back when they say they will. Papa Carlos says if he's going to be late, he calls Mama Maria so she can tell me. And they never, ever leave me alone. Even when they go on date night, Miss Jennifer from next door comes to stay with me, and they always come home when they promised." "Reliability and consistency are very important to you," Judge Morrison observed. "I don't know those words," Emma admitted, "but I know that they do what they say. Their promises are real promises, not the kind that disappear." Judge Morrison had to pause, removing her glasses to wipe her eyes. Around the courtroom, tissues appeared like magic. Even the court reporter was crying, though her fingers never stopped moving across the keys. "Emma, I need to ask you about your biological mother. Do you understand that if this adoption goes through, your relationship with her will legally change?" This was the hardest question, the one everyone had been dreading. Emma's face grew solemn, and she was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her words were measured, clearly the product of many therapy sessions with Dr. Chen. "My first mommy loved me, but she was too sick to take care of me. Dr. Chen says her brain got sick, and the sickness made her forget important things like feeding me and staying with me. That doesn't mean she was a bad person. It means she needed help, and I needed to be somewhere safe while she got help. The courtroom was absolutely silent, everyone hanging on this 3-year-old's words. I still love my first mommy, Emma continued, her voice wavering slightly. But I can't live with her because she's still too sick. Maybe someday when I'm bigger and she's better, I can visit her and tell her about my life. But Mama Maria and Papa Carlos are my parents now. They're the ones who take care of me every day. They're the ones who make me feel safe. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. That's a very mature understanding, Emma. One more question. Do you know what adoption means? What it will change? It means forever family, Emma said with conviction. It means even if something hard happens, we're still family. It means I get their last name, Rodriguez. So at school I'll be Emma Rodriguez instead of Emma Martinez. It means legally and officially and in every way I'm their daughter. And is that what you want? Emma turned to look at Maria and Carlos. Her entire face transformed, from serious to radiant, from guarded to open, from fearful to joyful. Yes, she said firmly, that's what I want more than anything in the whole world. Judge Morrison let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Thank you, Emma. You can go sit with Ranger now if you'd like. Emma practically flew to the golden dog, wrapping her arms around his neck. Ranger's tail wagged gently, and he licked her cheek, making her giggle, a sound that still amazed everyone who heard it. The judge then called Dr. Chen to testify. The psychologist's professional assessment was glowing. Emma had made extraordinary progress in 3 months, had formed secure attachment with the Rodriguez family, and showed clear preference for permanent placement with her foster parents. The therapeutic work with K-9 Officer Ranger has been instrumental, Dr. Chen testified. Emma has used her relationship with Ranger as a template for understanding that trust is possible after trauma. The dog's own history of abuse and recovery gave Emma a narrative framework for her own healing journey. Social worker Patricia Williams testified next, confirming that Maria and Carlos had completed all required training, that their home was appropriate, and that they demonstrated exceptional patience, consistency, and love throughout the placement. I've worked in child welfare for 19 years, Williams said. I've seen hundreds of foster placements. The bond between Emma and the Rodriguez family is one of the strongest I've ever witnessed. They've done everything right, pursued therapy, maintained boundaries with biological family, prioritized Emma's needs consistently. This is exactly what successful foster to adopt looks like. Then came the testimony that surprised everyone. Officer Thompson stood, and Judge Morrison nodded for him to speak. Your Honor, I know this is unusual, but I'd like to say something about Emma's character and resilience. Over the past 3 months, I've watched this child transform. But more than that, I've watched her develop empathy that's remarkable for her age. She asks about other children who visit Ranger. She wants to know if they're getting better too. Last week, she drew pictures for 3 other kids in the therapy program, children she's never met, because she wanted them to know friends are coming. Thompson's voice grew thick with emotion. Emma could have kept Ranger's help to herself. She could have been possessive of the thing that saved her. Instead, she insisted on sharing. She told me, other kids need friends too. That generosity of spirit after everything she's been through is extraordinary. The Rodriguez family is raising an exceptional human being. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the bailiff, tough as nails Marcus Williams, was openly crying. Judge Morrison took a moment to compose herself, then looked at Maria and Carlos. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, please stand. They stood together, hands clasped, faces wet with tears. I've reviewed all the evidence, all the testimony, all the reports. I've observed Emma's interactions and heard her clearly expressed wishes. And I've seen with my own eyes the transformation that love, stability, and commitment can create in a traumatized child's life. The judge paused, and the suspense in the courtroom was almost unbearable. It is the ruling of this court that the parental rights of Emma's biological mother, which were voluntarily terminated 3 months ago, remain terminated. Furthermore, this court grants the petition for adoption filed by Maria Elena Rodriguez and Carlos Miguel Rodriguez. Effective immediately, Emma Grace Martinez will be legally known as Emma Grace Rodriguez, and all rights and responsibilities of parenthood are hereby transferred to her adoptive parents. The gavel came down with a decisive crack. "Congratulations," Judge Morrison said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You have a daughter." The courtroom erupted. Maria and Carlos held each other, sobbing. Emma ran to them and they scooped her up together, a family united finally and forever. Around them, people applauded, cheered, and cried without shame or restraint. Ranger's tail wagged furiously, and he let out one celebratory bark, a breach of protocol that Thompson didn't even try to correct. Because some moments were bigger than rules. Some moments changed everything. And this was one of them. 2 years later, on a brilliant Saturday morning in May, Riverside Park in downtown Memphis was transformed. Colorful banners reading Emma's Friends K-9 Therapy Program, second annual community celebration, fluttered in the gentle breeze. White tents dotted the green space, each hosting different activities: face painting, informational booths, demonstration areas, and adoption stations for shelter dogs. But the heart of the event was the central stage, where 5-year-old Emma Grace Rodriguez stood at a microphone that had been lowered to her height. She wore a bright yellow dress covered in, what else? Golden retrievers, and her hair was pulled back with butterfly clips. Beside her sat Ranger, now nearly 6 years old, his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight, his therapy vest adorned with multiple commendation medals. Maria and Carlos stood in the front row of the crowd that had gathered, holding hands so tightly their fingers had gone white. Behind them, hundreds of people had assembled, families who'd been helped by the therapy program, volunteers, police officers, city officials, news crews, and curious community members who'd followed Emma's story from the beginning. Officer Jake Thompson stood to the side of the stage, his chest tight with emotion. In the 2 years since Emma had first spoken in that courtroom, his life had changed beyond recognition. The K-9 therapy program he'd run single-handedly with Ranger had exploded into a full department with 6 certified therapy dogs, 4 trainers, 2 full-time coordinators, and a waiting list that stretched 8 months long. But more than the professional expansion, it was the personal transformations that got to him. The children whose lives had been touched by these remarkable dogs, 387 kids so far, each one carrying their own trauma, each one finding their own path to healing. "Are you ready, sweet pea?" Maria had asked Emma that morning as they'd practiced her speech one last time at the kitchen table. "I'm ready, Mama," Emma had replied with the confidence of a child who'd learned she was loved unconditionally. "Ranger will be with me. I'm always brave when Ranger's with me." Now standing before this crowd, Emma cleared her throat and began to speak. Her voice was strong, clear, with no trace of the rusty silence that had once imprisoned her. "Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Grace Rodriguez, and I'm 5 years old. 2 years ago, I was really sad and really scared, and I forgot how to talk." The crowd was absolutely silent, hanging on every word. "Bad things happened to me when I was little," Emma continued, speaking with the rehearsed honesty that Dr. Chen had helped her craft, truthful but age-appropriate, vulnerable but not oversharing. "My first mommy loved me, but she got sick in her brain and couldn't take care of me anymore. I had to go live with strangers, and I was so scared that I stopped using my words. For 6 whole months, I didn't say anything to anybody." Maria wiped tears from her eyes. Even after 2 years, hearing Emma talk about her trauma still broke her heart. "But then one day, I met someone special." Emma looked down at Ranger, her small hand resting on his head. "I met Ranger. He's a police dog, but he's also a therapy dog, which means his job is to help people who are sad or scared or hurt." Ranger's tail wagged gently, as if he understood every word. Officer Thompson told me that Ranger used to be sad and scared too. Bad people hurt him really badly and left him to die. But good people saved him and he got better. And when I looked in Ranger's eyes, I saw that he understood exactly how I felt. He knew what it was like to be hurt. He knew what it was like to be scared. But he also knew something really, really important. Emma paused for dramatic effect, just as she'd practiced. He knew that you can get better, that broken things can be fixed, that even when really terrible things happen, you can still be happy again. You can still have friends. You can still have love. In the crowd, a woman named Jennifer Park held her 7-year-old son closer. 2 months ago, Marcus had met Ranger after witnessing a violent robbery. He hadn't spoken for 3 weeks. Now, thanks to weekly sessions with the therapy dog, he was talking again, laughing again, slowly rebuilding his shattered sense of safety. Jennifer had tears streaming down her face as she listened to Emma articulate what her own son had experienced. "When I first saw Ranger, I didn't even think about it," Emma continued. "I just walked right up to him and I said 2 words, 'My friend.' And those were the first words I'd said in 187 days." A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. People who'd heard this story before but were still moved by it, and newcomers hearing it for the first time. After that day, I started talking more and more, and Ranger kept visiting me twice every week for months and months. I would tell him everything, all my scared feelings, all my confused feelings, all my happy feelings too. He never judged me. He never told me I was being silly. He just listened and loved me exactly as I was. Thompson had to look away, blinking rapidly. Even after 2 years, Emma's simple eloquence could still reduce him to tears. "And then something amazing happened," Emma said, her voice rising with excitement. "Other kids started meeting Ranger too. Kids who were sad like me. Kids who were scared like me. Kids who needed a friend who understood. And Ranger helped them too." She gestured to the area behind the stage, where 5 other therapy dogs were positioned with their handlers, each one a rescue, each one trained in the same careful, patient way Ranger had been. "This is Luna," Emma said as a 3-legged golden retriever stood up. "She lost her leg in a car accident, but now she helps kids who have been in accidents feel brave again. This is Duke." A German shepherd with graying around his muzzle stood at attention. "People used him for dog fighting, which is really mean, but now he helps kids who have seen violence learn that not all big dogs are scary." Emma continued introducing each dog. Bella, the anxious border collie who helped children with anxiety disorders. Max, the elderly lab mix who specialized in grief counseling for children who'd lost parents. And Sophie, a mixed breed who worked specifically with children in the foster care system, just like Emma had been. "These dogs have all been hurt just like the kids they help," Emma explained. "And that's what makes them so good at their jobs. They understand. They really, truly understand." The crowd broke into spontaneous applause. Several handlers wiped their eyes, moved by this 5-year-old's ability to articulate what they'd all witnessed but struggled to express. Emma waited for the applause to die down, then continued with the most important part of her speech. "Today, we're here to celebrate 2 whole years of Emma's Friends. That's what we named the program, Emma's Friends, because Ranger was my friend first, and now these amazing dogs are friends to lots and lots of kids." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her dress pocket. "I asked Officer Thompson to tell me some numbers, because I wanted you to know how many kids we've helped. In 2 years, the Emma's Friends program has helped 387 kids. Some of them only needed to meet the dogs once or twice. Some of them, like me, needed to see them for a really long time. But every single one of those kids is doing better now than they were before." Maria couldn't contain her pride. Her daughter, her legally adopted, forever daughter, was standing on a stage speaking to hundreds of people about trauma and healing with the poise of someone 3 times her age. "But we need your help," Emma said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. There are still so many kids who need friends. Kids who are scared and sad and don't know that they can feel better. We need more therapy dogs. We need more trainers. We need more people who believe that broken things can be fixed and that love is stronger than hurt. She looked directly at the camera that was live streaming the event. If you want to help, you can donate money to train more dogs. You can volunteer to foster dogs while they're learning to be therapy dogs. You can adopt dogs from shelters, especially the older ones or the scared ones or the ones with 3 legs or the ones that other people think are broken. Because those are exactly the dogs that make the best healers. Thompson felt his heart swell with pride. This child had taken her own pain and transformed it into purpose, into advocacy for others still suffering. I also want to say something to any kids who might be watching this, Emma said, her voice softening. If you're sad or scared or if bad things happen to you, I want you to know something really important. It's not your fault. Whatever happened, it's not your fault. And you can get better, I promise. It might take a long time. It might be really hard, but you can heal. You can be happy again. You can have friends and family who love you. I know because it happened to me. In the crowd, a 9-year-old girl named Sophia clutched her mother's hand. She'd been selectively mute for 4 months after her father's death. Next week, she had her first appointment to meet Duke. Listening to Emma, Sophia felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find her voice again too. And to all the grown-ups who help kids like me, Emma continued, thank you. Thank you to the police officers who save dogs and train them. Thank you to the foster parents who love kids even when we're scared and difficult. Thank you to the therapists who are patient with us. Thank you to the judges who make good decisions. Thank you to everyone who believes that kids are worth saving. She looked directly at Maria and Carlos. And special thank you to my mama and papa, who loved me even when I couldn't talk, who never gave up on me, and who gave me a forever home. Carlos lost his composure entirely, burying his face in his hands. Maria wrapped her arm around him, her own face streaming with tears. One more thing, Emma said, kneeling down beside Ranger. She wrapped her arms around the dog's neck in a gesture that had become iconic, the image that had launched the entire program, the moment that had changed everything. Thank you, Ranger, she whispered into his fur, but the microphone caught it anyway. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for showing me that I could trust again. Thank you for saving me. Ranger turned his head and gently licked Emma's cheek, his tail wagging with the pure, uncomplicated joy that only dogs seem to master. The crowd erupted in applause, but it quickly transformed into a standing ovation. People were openly weeping, clapping, cheering. News cameras captured every moment. Social media lit up with posts about Emma's story and Rangers of hope. Emma stood up, took a small bow, then ran off the stage straight into Maria and Carlos's arms. They caught her together, holding her tight, this miraculous child who'd come into their lives silent and terrified and had bloomed into this confident, compassionate, extraordinary little person. I'm so proud of you, baby girl, Maria whispered into Emma's hair. So proud. Did I do good, Mama? Emma asked. You did perfect, sweet pea, absolutely perfect. Officer Thompson approached with Ranger, and Emma immediately hugged the dog again. We did good, Ranger. We told everybody about how friends help friends. The rest of the day unfolded in a blur of joy. Families met the therapy dogs. Children who'd been helped by the program shared their stories. Volunteers signed up in droves. By the end of the event, enough money had been donated to fund 3 additional therapy dog positions. But the most magical moment came in the late afternoon, as the crowd was thinning out. A woman approached Maria hesitantly, holding the hand of a small girl who looked about 4 years old. The child's eyes were downcast, her body language screaming trauma and fear. Excuse me, the woman said quietly, are you Emma's mom? I am, Maria confirmed. My daughter, she's been in foster care for 8 months. She hasn't spoken since we got her, But she watched Emma's speech today and the woman's voice broke. She pointed at your daughter and whispered, the first words she said in months, she whispered, "She's like me." Maria's eyes filled with tears. She knelt down to the little girl's level. "Hi, sweetheart. My daughter Emma used to be quiet too, just like you, but she got better. And you know what helped her?" The little girl's eyes flickered up briefly. "A very special dog named Ranger," Maria continued. "Would you like to meet him?" The smallest nod. Thompson brought Ranger over and they watched as the same magic that had touched Emma began to work on this new child. The girl reached out a tentative hand. Ranger sat perfectly still, patient and gentle. Her fingers touched his fur. And then, barely audible, she whispered, "Soft." One word, just one word, but it was a beginning. Emma, watching from a few feet away, smiled. She walked over and knelt beside the little girl. "Hi, I'm Emma. This is my friend Ranger. He can be your friend too. Friends help friends feel brave." The little girl looked at Emma with something like wonder, as if she was seeing proof that healing was possible, that silence didn't have to be permanent, that broken things could indeed be made whole. As the sun set over Riverside Park, casting golden light across the scene, Officer Thompson looked around at everything they'd built, from one 3-year-old's 2-word declaration. The therapy dogs helping children across the city. The families being healed. The community that had rallied around the simple truth that love and connection could overcome even the deepest wounds. He thought about that July night 3 years ago when he'd found Ranger chained to a dumpster, broken and dying. He thought about the countless hours of rehabilitation, training, and hope. He thought about the moment Ranger's eyes had locked onto Emma's in that courtroom. Some partnerships were simply meant to be. Some dogs were born to be heroes. Some children were destined to transform their pain into purpose. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world aligned perfectly to create something beautiful from something broken. Thompson knelt down beside his partner, scratching behind Ranger's ears. "You did good, buddy. You saved her, and she saved so many others." Ranger's tail wagged, and he leaned into Thompson's touch, content in the simple joy of a job well done. Across the park, Emma was still talking to the little girl, sharing her story, offering hope, being the light she wished someone had shown her during her darkest days. This was the ripple effect of healing. This was the power of one rescue dog and one traumatized child recognizing themselves in each other. This was proof that no matter how deep the wound, how long the silence, how heavy the trauma, connection could heal, love could restore, and friendship could save lives. 2 years ago, Emma had found her voice. Today, she was helping others find theirs. And tomorrow, Ranger would wake up and do it all over again, one wounded heart at a time, one gentle touch at a time, one miraculous transformation at a time. Because that's what heroes do. They show up. They love unconditionally. And they prove again and again that healing is always possible. Always. The end.